Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? I'm Nathan Mercereau, and as a financial advisor with over 25 years of experience, I've learned that the quality of the people you spend time with is a lot more valuable than what can show up in a set of financial projections. And growing up in Canada, I discovered you can learn a lot about a person when you spend a day in a canoe with them. So I created this show where I interview people I find interesting and inspiring. I invite you to listen in and learn from their stories so you can create the life you want, one filled with wealth, wisdom, meaning, and purpose. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined by Alison Marckstadt of Succession Advisors. Alison and I recently met at a conference, and we're on a panel discussing the needs of families and legacy planning. And Alison's firm, Succession Advisors, focuses on family legacy planning, wealth resources, and luxury lifestyle connections. So, Alison, welcome to Day in a Canoe. I really appreciated getting to know you at the conference, and I'm excited to hear about what Succession Advisors is really focused on.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And when you are helping families, what are you finding are some trends or some needs that you're speaking into?
I think the one consistent theme that we see is a breakdown in communication. So I think without question, starting and creating a format or an environment that is conducive to constructive communication amongst families is the key to really engaging and also ensuring that and enhancing the existing relationship, right? And communication doesn't have to mean that they don't get along. It's just finding ways to have substantive conversations around some difficult topics.
And how have you observed families, without your guidance, address this whole issue? I'm sure many people just avoid it, or they think they've communicated, but really they haven't. What have you seen?
So I think it's both those. Some feel as if they have communicated their expectations or that there is kind of an open door policy of constructive communication and dialogue. Others will find ways to try and plan maybe through estate planning, right? And establishing the guardrails and the expectations through the legal process that therefore eliminates any sort of concerns or potential, slip ups. And both of those are not, we have found that both of those routes aren't necessarily bulletproof. A lot of times, through trust and estate documents, things can be missed, nuances can be missed. And then, of course, understanding for the inheritors as to why those decisions were made, we find that to be pretty critical in ensuring that they are responsible stewards of inheritance.
I know that you've been in the wealth management space for a number of years. How has your career evolved, and what are some maybe lessons learned along the way or things that stand out for you?
Well, I started as a receptionist in a tax and accounting firm because I needed a job. And I just happened to stumble into a firm in New York where they had a large family office. It happened to be Bloomberg. And this firm handled all of the various aspects of the family office for both the business, the personal, the campaigns, the foundation, et cetera. So that was really my first insight into the complexities of multi-generational wealth. Since then, I had the opportunity about a decade ago in working with the founder of a large private equity firm that eventually went public during my tenure. He also had a family office, but it was a much more what we kind of see now. Bloomberg was a business in and of itself. This family office had a larger focus kind of on the soft skills, engaging with next generation, and next generation being very involved in a lot of the decision making and the conversations. And so that's where I started to see that there was this immense need and interest in how do you ensure that the passions and the purpose transpires across generations.
That's fascinating. And for listeners, could you just unpack what defines a family office and even a multi-family office?
Absolutely. So I worked in a multifamily office most recently as a wealth manager. And a multifamily office is generally a registered investment advisory firm that provides the additional services that many family offices employ individuals to do. So that could be bill pay, accounting, tax prep, as well as sometimes the concierge piece. As you mentioned, we have luxury as one of the silos of our business as well. A family office is typically, when the wealth and the complexities of the family are substantive enough that it denotes the need to have employees full-time in-house. And there can be a number of reasons, not just because of the size or the complexity, but it could be for confidentiality purposes. It could just be that there are enough additional entities or individuals or generations that elicit additional support. And a lot of times a family office is bred out of an existing operating business where you'll have some hybrid employees. And then as the need starts to really develop, or you hone in on the expectations and the lifestyle of the family, you're able to kind of denote and carve out independent roles that then become the family office.
I know there's a significant dynamic within a family when someone, typically the parents, have created wealth, or even grandparents have created wealth. And there's this cascade effect of just sense of obligation, or maybe a sense of like a standard that's set that needs to be met from either a management or a lifestyle standpoint. How do families navigate these things? And I guess, what have you seen in terms of maybe some of the challenges around expectations within families, and what's a path forward through that?
I think this goes back to communication. I think a lot of times there's a misalignment in expectations. I think that often inheritors or next gen feels an immense responsibility to maintain and carry on the legacy. But in some ways, there's, a tremendous shadow, right? What has been built by matriarch, patriarch, and continued can be daunting. And I feel strongly that having conversations around that helps alleviate the misalignment. It also helps find ways and roles for the family members to feel really empowered, so that the legacy a lot of times doesn't have to be just enhancing the wealth. It could be the reputational aspect. It can be the philanthropy aspect. But I think sometimes it's the not ever coming to the table and saying, I feel a tremendous responsibility, because projected or unprojected, this is what has, just kind of grown innately through watching. And maybe mom and dad or grandmother, grandfather, work so hard to grow the operating business or the portfolio, or leave, the financial wealth to the following generation, so they can actually pursue something different versus, continuing to maintain. And in other ways, it's, the expectation is that the next generation comes into the family business or has some specific role within the family. But once that's identified, the most important thing is setting them up for success, right? It can't just be, okay, Johnny is going to take over because he's the eldest son. It's, does Johnny have the ability to take over? Has he developed the skill set to do so? Or maybe it's someone else in the family who really has leadership skills, and he is very good at assessing X, Y, and Z.
And how do you advise when families have kind of multiple objectives, family members? So maybe Johnny does want to be in the business, but maybe Johnny's not equipped to really step into that role. Whereas another family member says, I want nothing to do with the business and I want to pursue my own interest and passion. How do you tie that all together in helping the family?
Creating a roadmap and a succession plan is critical. It's assessing, if you were looking for a CEO, if you are looking for a successor within a business, generally there is a job description, right? And a track record for an individual that you're considering for any candidate that comes in the door. It should be the same for family members. We also encourage non-family members, so other C-suite executives, to weigh in on this and to be part of the conversation and roadmap for the individual that has been identified as the successor. If there's interest on both sides, I feel in a lot of cases there's the opportunity to develop the necessary traits to take on the role. Sometimes there's not, and then there has to be a conversation around that also. And maybe that's an opportunity to find another role that is more fulfilling and more aligned with the individual's capabilities. For those who don't have an interest in being in the company, if there is an operating company, it's just as important to identify a role for them, because family members are tied regardless, right? So even if they don't come into the company, say the brother is going to assume the role of CEO and the sister doesn't have any interest in being involved, she may still have interest in having a voice or a vote in some of the large, sort of macro issues pertaining to the operating business, because it affects her as well. And so it's just identifying those. And again, it all comes back to communication and expectations, while then allowing her to pursue whatever it is of interest to her as well.
That makes sense. And so many times we assume communication has occurred, but many times it hasn't. And I think the art of just constantly going back and clarifying expectations, having forthright conversations, doing that with compassion, with love, with awareness and empathy of others, I think is really important within an environment where these decisions need to be made. Now, I know that you made a decision yourself to co-found Succession Advisors. Tell me about that. Like, what's it like as you kind of drive in a similar but different lane within the industry, helping families like you are?
As I guess going back to your question about the difference of a multifamily office and a single family office, what I found is when I left the family office on a full-time basis and went to the multifamily office, which is just, a number of families. At the time I had about 25 that I was supporting. And I saw that there was a consistency in a lack of access to individuals and professionals in the areas of governance and succession planning and wealth education. And that a lot of times, just the lack of awareness that these issues could arise, or that there were individuals who could help kind of steer the family and facilitate growth and knowledge in these areas, was the number one factor as to why people didn't do it. And so my partner, I was fortunate to be introduced to her years ago. And we started talking. She's a former trust and estate advisor, turned wealth strategist. And she was in a similar situation where she was only called in the really, really large families who had already kind of bought into the idea of her level of expertise. But there were so many who still could benefit, right, from access to this sort of information without necessarily having to have a consultant or an advisor. And that's where we came up with the idea of kind of democratizing the information and creating an educational platform.
And so as you look forward, what motivates you? What inspires you about what's ahead?
So many things. I'm inspired by the next generation. I think things are moving so quickly, and having access, which is not something my generation had, but to real-time information is exciting. I think it's hard to discern a lot of times, but I think there's so much opportunity ahead, and having, just a small chance to maybe positively impact those who are in positions to really make a difference, based on, the families and the legacy and the resources, to me is really exciting. And I have 2 little girls. And so, I know how impactful that is. I tell them all the time, they can change the world. And I believe that this generation can.
That's fantastic. And given your tenure in the wealth management space, looking back to the day that you were the receptionist starting out, any advice that you would give young Allison at the reception desk? Just kind of considering all the ins and outs, ups and downs of a career track, and even things that you would pass on to your children. Any learnings that
Yes,
stand out along the way?
I think, and I had mentioned this on the panel we were on, just showing up, I think, has been the sort of pivotal component in every step of my career. I think, initially I was doing it because I needed extra income. But I think the aspect of just being there and the attitude around, getting involved in learning in any way that you can from others who know more than you is an unprecedented education in life. And I just accepted every opportunity, every project, every additional responsibility that came my way. I'd probably go back and tell myself, though, also develop a hobby. Because I think that that's important to balance as well. So I'm trying now to find a hobby.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's excellent advice. I think there's, well, first of all, showing up it demonstrates commitment, the focus on continuous learning, but also balancing it with fun and hobbies, I think, is what keeps us energized. So I know that
Right.
I'm working on that as well, and I think it's a worthy pursuit when you can look at things that are enjoyable and that you can share with others, and you can have family time around. So. I think I encourage you in that pursuit, and we'll circle back and maybe hold each other accountable and share some takeaways in a few months on how that hobby
I think
pursuit
that's a
is
good
going.
idea.
Yeah. Well, Alison, thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us today in Day in a Canoe. I want to just express gratitude and you taking time to share your perspective, and wish you all the best in the days ahead.
No, thank you. And same to you. I'm looking forward to continuing to stay in touch and grow our relationship as well.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and tuning in to Day in a Canoe. We're thrilled to have you as part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends and loved ones. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on social media platforms by searching Day in a Canoe. We'll see you next time.